And when I was 14, the war in Ukraine had started. The southeast of Ukraine is currently occupied by Russian army. There's a lot of crime. We had no food. Like the law didn't work at all. I almost died twice because of it. I was under artillery strike, so I was very, very, very close.
Okay, today we have a very special guest, and it's our great friend Vladislav Sushenko. Can you tell a bit?
Yeah, so he lives amidst the war in Ukraine, and even though he's 17, even though he's living in these tough circumstances, he has managed to enter some of the most prestigious programs of mathematics at Princeton, and he's applying to different universities, from my understanding. And also, he's building a tech company, and it's very interesting how he has been able to be resilient through everything. So, we hope you enjoy his story or just part of it, because we're gonna be doing a series about him. He's wild.
Okay, let's get to it. Hey, what's up? Welcome to another Silicon Valley podcast. And today we have a very, very special guest and a very good friend of mine, Vladislav Sushenko. I don't know, so introduce yourself, Vlad.
My name is Vlad. I'm from Ukraine. I'm 17, and I'm very happy to be at this podcast right now. So, yeah, let's go.
Yeah. No, that's the an impressive part. Like when we first met, Vlad, right? It was like a very shitty event, like in Mexico, and then I was like watching like a bunch of this, like of these guys and founders that were at the event, and I noticed Vlad talking about like technology, and I was like, okay, this guy knows. I'm like a CTO, so I started talking to him, and I swear to God that he was like 30 years old or something. I mean, you look older than you, but eventually, like I start talking to him, and then I get really impressed by his like, like his mindset and his technical abilities. And then he tells me he's 16, and I'm like, what? You're 16? You have a company? You're in Mexico? Like, why are you here? Like, what are you doing? And that's what I want everyone to find out. Like, what were you doing in Mexico? You said you're from Ukraine. Like, why did you move to Mexico, and like why did we meet there?
So I'm from the southeast of Ukraine, and when I was 14, the war in Ukraine had started. So, and basically the southeast of Ukraine is currently occupied by Russian army. So, and it was like completely, like it was a lot of crime. We had no food. Like the law didn't work at all. Like Russian army just could steal you and kill you. So we had to leave. I almost died twice because of it. Like I was under artillery strike, so I was very, very, very close to die. But now I'm here, so I'm pretty lucky actually.
We're glad you're
So then my parents moved to the Kiev, which is the capital of Ukraine, and my sister just told me like, "Yo, man, what's up? Come to Mexico." She was in Mexico at that moment, and I was like, "Sounds good to me. Like, why not?" My parents stayed at Kiev, and I moved to Mexico. It was like my first time actually living abroad, so it was like very, very, very different from what I've seen in Ukraine. And then my progress was like evolving exponentially because I was surrounded by very old people, very smart people, like not very old, older than me. And my progress started like getting faster and faster and faster and faster. I got into technology, I got into many, many things. And yeah, it was like a lot of experience, a lot of things that made me who I am right now.
And when you say you started getting into technology, does that mean like that was your first encounter with the tech ecosystem, or had you had any encounter before?
I mean, I'm talking more about AI. So I was in tech since I was like 12, maybe 11. So yeah, I was like, yeah, more like with AI, like discrete math and machine learning.
Yeah. No, yeah, and it's interesting because, like, for example, you moved to Mexico and like to a completely different country. You had no friends. You lost all your friends. You lost your parents and like your parents who stayed at Kiev, and they stayed at Kiev because like they were, like they're nuclear engineers, right?
Yeah, so in fact, my dad just cannot leave the country and he doesn't really want to, and my mom wants to stay with him. So it's just like a loop.
Yeah.
So they in Ukraine, I was completely free. I just moved to Mexico. Yeah, like made my living there.
Yeah, and so and in Mexico, like for example, because before when you were in Kiev, after like before the war has started, like were you as ambitious like compared to where when you moved to Mexico, or did you start building because you had to? I want to I want other people to find like that where
Yeah.
that.
I mean,
Yeah.
I've been building since I was like 6, 7. I've been building things like mostly airplanes, right? So I
Yeah,
wasn't aerodynamic,
Regular thing, like
simulations,
real airplanes, you mean?
Yeah, like we built an airplane with my dad.
Okay.
And when I moved to Mexico, I just realized how big this world actually is. So my vision of this world just expanded by, I mean, I'll say like 180 degrees. So I realized that there is a lot of things that I can do. And I realized that it's actually about what you believe about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't believe in myself as much when I was in Ukraine. And in Mexico, I realized that I can do whatever the hell I want to.
And why do you think you didn't believe that about yourself in Kiev? And what changed in Mexico that made you believe that you were capable?
Because I've seen a lot of rich people. I've seen a lot of people who succeed in their lives. I've seen what you can actually do when you're young, and what people actually appreciate in their lives. So I just didn't see it before.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of like when we met, right? Like you had like a very you know, like a close panoramic view of like even bigger than Ukraine. But then like when we met, you started asking me like a bunch of questions, and I told you everything about like Silicon Valley, there's different universities in the United States, and you're like, oh my God, there's even more. So
Yeah.
it's kind of fun. Like I remember that day we were talking, and you were like, you said we were finishing the event. I was leaving, and then you were like, "Hey, Andre and Diego at the time, right?" And you said, Can we go like chat and like eat some pizza together? Because, and this is like the little words you said, because I have not met any young people like around me, and I'm hanging out with 30, 40-year-olds." And I want to be friends with you. And I thought like that was like such a good message, because I was like, okay, yeah, let's go eat for a pizza. And then we talked like a whole night, like the entire night.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and I want to touch on that because I feel like sometimes we realize that there's power in surrounding ourselves with people that inspire us, and that starts changing the game. And the fact that you reached out, that's something we sometimes forget to do. Maybe we go to an event and we get super inspired. We have that fire starting to like burn within us, and then the event ends, and it ends, and we don't do any follow up. Just the fact that you did text them, how do you feel that changed the game for you? Like, do you feel like that action you did led you to like more growth?
I mean, I'm very, very happy. I think it was like one of the most crucial days in my life when I met Andre and Diego, because like it actually changed the vector of my development by a lot. I mean, at that moment, I already had a company, and it was like a very basic model, is just like outsourced mobile app development, nothing special. But then Andre tells me about AI, and I'm like, wow, wow. Yeah, we just spoke all night long about AI, about universities in the US, about Silicon Valley, and I was so impressed. Like I was actually inspired. Well, I can't even explain it. So at that day, on that day, just my life changed very, very, very much, and I'm happy it happened. Very, very
Yeah.
happy.
And I love hearing that because I think I mentioned that to Andre when we started living in Silicon Valley. And it's that analogy that a tree can only grow as big as the pot it is planted in, right? Like your roots cannot expand. And what you're mentioning is that you realized that you could grow even more. And I think that's something that's a breakthrough, right? Because sometimes we're so comfortable in our countries, in the places like we've always been, and we feel like we're at the top of the world. Like, oh yeah, I started building at 6 or whatnot, like I'm the coolest guy in town. And then you go out of town, and you're not the coolest guy in town. You're
Yeah.
actually the smallest person on the world,
Or the dumbest person.
or the
Yeah,
dumbest
exactly.
person in the world, which leads to the comment that people say that if you're the smartest guy in the room,
You're
you
in
are
the
in the
wrong-
wrong room.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
I feel like it's one of the best sayings ever that I've ever heard in my life. Because when I was in Mexico and before I met Andre, I thought that I was like, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty smart, like for my age. But then I met guys that are not that, like they're not much older than me, just like 3, 4 years. And they tell me that like they own a company, they're doing AI, they live in the US, and they're just like traveling in Mexico, getting some clients. And I'm like, wow, man, I'm so dumb. Like, what the hell? So dumb.
Yeah.
Actually liked it, you know. It was actually great. So
Mm-hmm.
then we went to Andre's apartment and we just spoke, and it was so amazing to feel dumb.
Yeah, and also like another part, like from this topic of like you being the dumbest guy in the room, which is like a very good thing to have. Like actually, like Stella and me, like helped Vlad because he's super smart. He's a little genius. We helped them like get into one of the top programs for like discrete math and computer science in like in the world for Princeton and UPenn, like which is like, and he did it. Like he did the interviews and everything, and he got in. And now like you meet all these other like 16-year-old, 12-year-olds for like what?
And it's like it's a whole other story. So there is a 12-year-old Asian guy, and he is a mentor. He's 12.
That's awesome,
I was
bro.
like, what? Like pass exams like 80%. So I mean, pretty decent, including the fact that we had no electricity and I didn't have much time to study. Um, 80% is fine, but then you realize that this guy, he's 12 and he probably does it at 150%. Bro, it's just like, yeah.
Oh.
I mean, they're very smart guys. I spoke to a couple of them. They also code like, I mean, it's a computer science program. They're very smart. They also want to get to a nice school.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't actually feel that much of passion and the drive to like build something, to be creative, to start something that a lot of people will use in the future. And it was actually something very weird to me. So they're very smart. They're much smarter than me. I understand it. I accept it. But for some reason, I didn't feel like this drive.
Yeah, because I feel like there's also different personalities and different things that are needed in the world. Like maybe they're meant more for research or academia. And then there's other people like you, like Andre, like myself, who love to build. And we need those people as well. We need the people that are not going to go out and grind, but they're going to stay and mentor and be 12-year-olds. We need
Yeah.
all of them. Like we need everyone, right?
Yeah, that's true. Like it's actually very important to surround yourself with like
Like,
different people, not just from one point of view, like from Andre and you, for example, but other types of people, so that you don't stay in that small pot for a tree.
Yeah, that's called like multidisciplinary groups. So having people of different disciplines around you, I see that as well. I feel like when I started surrounding myself with artists, but also tech people, but also like math people, but also business people, like you get the best of everything. And if you ever get a challenge, you know who to go to, and you don't need to know everything. Sometimes you just need to know everyone, right?
But there are few people that can actually hang out with all these groups.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you need like multifaceted people,
Yeah.
and founders have that like very common trait that you can connect with like an artist and with a mathematician, a physicist, and a doctor, and like
Yeah. They usually use the word generalist. Like most founders are generalists or polymaths. Like we love different areas of existence, and we just like integrating the coolest parts to create things that will make the world better, right? And I see that in all of the people that's in this room, right?
Yeah. So we're running like out of time. So yeah, I know. Like Vlad's story is amazing. If you guys want to hear more about Vlad and what he's building, please comment below and we can do a whole episode on that. But Vlad, so for all the young people, like from even like a 16 years old to like a 30-year-old, like you can,
younger,
or if younger, you can inspire them through this podcast. Like what would you say to them, like based on your experience, like what do they need to do to start like building? And because you come from like a rough background in Ukraine, like mid-war, and you had to figure out your life in Mexico, and now you're grabbing all these opportunities like for like the math and computer science program, and you're still building your companies, and there's a bunch of stories that we haven't told, but what would you say to them?
Yeah, and maybe just to add to that question, a lot of us live in very challenging circumstances, and sometimes we let that stop us. I think you mentioned it, but we didn't go much into that. But right now you're in Ukraine and there's not much electricity. Sometimes, like I think it's just like a certain period of time, and then the rest of it you don't have electricity. So that's something that someone would say, nah, like you know what, I don't have electricity. I should just not do the things. Like maybe those things are not meant for me. So to anyone that's seeing limitations in their lives, what would you also tell them?
Firstly, answering to Andres' question is, I'm gonna say a very basic thing. It's do not be afraid. Do not be afraid to fail, and do not be afraid of your future. If you actually want to, you'll find a way. You will always find a way if you actually want it. That's what I learned. Like there's a very interesting saying in Ukrainian language. I wouldn't say it in English, but
try fail.
it's like it's pretty inappropriate. But if you actually want to, but it's like my dad was always saying it to me. Like if you actually want to take a shit, you will always take your pants off. So it means like if you actually want something, you will always find a way. And then answering to the next question is again, what was it?
So the fact that sometimes we're faced with limitations, sometimes we let them stop us, but sometimes we find ways around those.
Yeah, you just need to set yourself to this kind of mindset where first of all you solve problems and you do not give up. Like you accept those circumstances in your life, and then you have a goal and you try to break it down to the smallest possible step, so that today I can help my friend get like $15 and I can go to a coffee shop to work there because they have a diesel generator. And like you need to try to break your problem down to the smallest possible detail, and you'll definitely find a workaround.
Yes.
I know we're on time, but I would like to ask, can I ask one more thing?
Yes, of course. Yes.
Just like I know that there were a lot of things that you had to do in life to actually like move forward sometimes, like things people would not expect, but things that you thought were necessary. Can you just mention like one example of that? Like, oh, you were in this very hard situation and you had to do this to get out of it, just so we can get an idea of the types of things that we can do when facing circumstances like that.
No, but the lengths that Vlad went in order to work, because he just mentioned, maybe you missed it, but he mentioned like selling something to his friend for $15 so that he could go to a coffee shop with an actual generator, because in Ukraine they're bombing the city, so there's no like electricity everywhere. But he has to pay for electricity for him to go to these classes, continue building his startup, and that's a clear example of how he doesn't make excuses. So do you have another story for that?
Yes, actually I do. When I was in my hometown and the Russian army occupied our hometown, they just shut down all the cellular data. So it was impossible to call anyone. It was impossible to like have any internet. We just had nothing. And the only way to get internet would be try to make a hotspot from your phone at night. So that's why I had to change my schedule from 8 p.m. So I'd wake up at 8 p.m., talk to my girlfriend at that moment. Then from like 1, 2 a.m., I would work until 10, 11 a.m. So like all night long. And that was like the moment when we just stopped having any data. I would just like cook myself a breakfast and go to sleep. So that I had to adjust my schedule so that I would have internet and I would be able to work at night.
Oh, yeah, that's wild. Well, thank you for that. I know you have more stories that you'll tell us in the next episode because we'll definitely have Vlad in the next episodes. But just remember, I'll take a few takeaways from this. Doesn't matter how old you are. If you have something you want to build, you can do it. Remember that you can always find cool people to surround yourself with, but that you need to go out on the look for them.
Yeah, put yourself out there.
Yeah, maybe they're not on your circle. Maybe the people in your circle are not the ones that are inspiring, that are ideating new things, and that's fine. But you can and you have the power to go out there and find those things. Remember, every circumstance is just a circumstance. You can do anything, and you can find ways like Vlad has. So that's it for this episode. We love you all.
We love you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. So yeah, I'll be happy to share my story.